Hello, my name is Jacqueline Hoffman-Gibbs, and today I will be presenting a presentation on teen suicide in New York. Suicide is defined as the act of self-harm that causes the end of one's life. Suicide is a growing public health concern with serious and lasting effects on the well-being of impacted families and communities. Suicide is a major public health problem and a leading cause of death in the United States. The national rates of suicide has continuously increased in the United States since 1999. In 2014, suicide was the third leading cause of all deaths in New York State among residents aged 10 to 14 years old. But it is the second leading cause of death with residents between the ages 15 to 35. The myths about suicide are as follows. Suicide is not very common. Only certain people are at risk for suicide. I don't know anyone who may be thinking or may have thought of harming themselves. If someone speaks about suicide, they just want attention and don't mean it. If the individual is thinking of committing suicide, there is nothing I can do. These myths are some of the reasons why many people do not seek help when wanting to cause self-harm. They prevent many individuals from speaking up on their experiences and asking for help. Sometimes it can be that the individual thinks that they are alone, or that they may be feeling certain things that are not very common for most people. Here are some facts on suicide. There are over 800,000 people who die from suicide every year. Suicide rates are high among vulnerable groups who experience discrimination. These include refugees and immigrants, indigenous peoples, the LGBTQ community, and prisoners. One person dies from suicide every 40 seconds. Now think about that for a moment. The highest suicide rates in the United States are amongst white American Indians and Alaska Natives. There is one suicide for every estimated 25 suicide attempts. This means that for every 25 attempts, one person succeeds in ending their life. Depression is the leading cause of disability worldwide. Only half of all Americans experiencing an episode of major depression receive treatment. Now, the common reason for the very last bullet here is that the taboo that depression is something that a person can easily control. Sometimes it's difficult to think that help is out there. Depression is a mental disorder that can be treated with resources that are available all throughout the community, the state, and the nation. The stakeholders for these presentations are laid out as school support, policymakers, healthcare providers, community resources, and parents. Now on the next slide, we will show the relationship of the stakeholders in the influence diagram. Under this influence diagram, we see the number of supports that are available for teens living in New York, and generally for the country. Under policymakers, we have community leaders, city and state leaders. For resources, we have the suicide hotline, the mental health office, nonprofit organizations, and I also have the parents, because it can be difficult for parents to understand when their child might be at risk for suicide, because without knowing the proper risk factors surrounding suicide, the parents may be vulnerable and may not have the proper tools to help their child. Healthcare providers can be a great tool in dealing with mental health. We have our primary care providers, psychiatrists, and first responders if situations may arise that they may be the first individual to deal with suicide attempts. Now, school support is very important. I think that teachers, guidance counselors, coaches, and even social workers are the first one to acknowledge when a student might be showing some signs of wanting to end their life. They can identify the risk of tendencies that they may have and can provide further support in showing that resources are available. They can help point them out in the right direction and also get the parents involved in talking to the child about what they may be going through and the kind of experiences that they are having. Next, I will be showing you an infographic of teen suicide in New York. Here we have the facts of teen suicide in New York. For girls ages 15 to 19, the suicide rate has doubled in the recent years compared to the data prior to 2015. Suicide is the third leading cause of death amongst 15 to 24-year-olds in New York. The most common methods of suicide in young adults ages 15 to 19 is suffocation. The following methods are firearm, suffocation, poisoning and overdose, fall, cut, piercing, drowning, and other. There are 58% completed suicide that was done through suffocation. That is extremely alarming. This is a comparison of the national and state data in New York on suicide. In 2004, there are 11.4 deaths per 100,000 residents in the United States that died from suicide. In New York State, however, there were only 6.4 per 100,000 residents that died from suicide. In 2015, both of the data has shown an increase in the number of suicide in the state and in the country as well. United States now shows 13.8 per 100,000 residents and 8.3 per 100,000 residents in New York State. Here I list the risk factors for suicide. These include mental health illness, alcohol and drug abuse, history of trauma, previous suicide attempts or self-inflicted injury, family history of suicide, loss, local epidemics of suicide, easy access to lethal methods, trouble focusing or thinking clearly, increased withdrawal from family, friends, school, jobs, and society, lack of interest in favorite activities, reckless or risk-taking behaviors, rash, bizarre, or violent behavior, changed eating or sleeping patterns, deep feelings of grief, uncontrolled anger, anxiety, shame, hopelessness or guilt, and lack of sense of purpose in life. There are a lot of resources available on suicide, and it can be prevented. You are not alone, help is out there. I have listed numerous resources that are available in New York City, New York State, the national level, and they're all there to help support you and provide you with coping mechanisms that can help you get through the problems that you may be experiencing to prevent you from killing yourself. Next, we will discuss the dissemination of information on suicide prevention. The most available method and the best methods to use for dissemination of this information are the media, public transit, broadcasts, and community outreaches. Media is very important because social media, especially for the target age that we have for teens, is very important. Almost every teenager has a cell phone, has an access to a computer. It can be easy for them to obtain the information as long as we put it out there and let them know that help is available. I listed public transit because in New York State, MTA trains, buses are available, and they are the best way for teens living in the state to see the information in their daily lives. There can be postings made available on the trains and the buses that shows the information, the resources out there that can help one find the best information that they can use to assist them in finding the best coping mechanisms to deal with the problems that they're experiencing. Some of these information are through text, through call. You can even find a mental health professional to talk to over the phone, and they can assist you and guide you through your problems. Community outreach is also important because sometimes I think in a place like New York, it's extremely busy and it can be difficult to stop and think and look for information that is right in front of you. By having broadcast and community outreaches, we can make information available to the most remote areas and even in the busiest places in New York and let them know how they can find help. There can be centers, flyers, any information that one can use to help them prevent from killing themselves through suicide. I have researched some of the best action plan, and I think the ones laid out here might be the best to use in New York State. They are easy to do. There is a lot of information that can help stakeholders complete these action plan in assisting preventing suicide in a lot of our areas in New York. These include strengthen personal and social resources, inform about suicidality and promote awareness raising, offer help that is easily accessible, early recognition of suicidal behaviors and interventions, prompt treatment of and care for people who are at risk for suicide, reduce the availability of suicidal means and methods, support relatives, friends, and professionals who are affected by suicide, promote responsible and respectful reporting of suicides by the media, promote research and monitoring, disseminate best practice example of suicide prevention. Now, since there's already a lot of resources available out there, the best thing that we can do is to promote what we have to make sure that they are being utilized and that the residents of New York State are aware that this information is available to them. This is my references, but I just want to go back under action plan. One of the most important things that I discuss in this presentation is the myths regarding suicide. I think removing the myths can help us alleviate this issue in order to remove the taboo surrounding suicide. It is okay to talk about mental health. It is okay to ask for help. It is okay to admit that times can be difficult, and sometimes it's even okay to say that you've had enough. But always remember that suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. You are not alone. Help is out there. This is extremely important for us to talk about because there are a lot of people who are misinformed and they need to know that the information is out there. Now here's the references. Enjoy.